Hey everyone, we're talking about the trials and tribulations of what it means to learn art, what it means to be an artist. My name is Justin Donaldson.
I'm Grace Winstead.
And I'm Rachel Dene.
And this is the Paint and Pixels podcast. Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about kind of the invisible creative work that happens when you're not behind a canvas. And that'd be a canvas or your sketchbook or your, if you're writing. There's a lot of times and places where a lot of our work doesn't look like work, which I think is very interesting. And it can wreak havoc on us for a number of reasons. I know for me, when just coming out of school and coming out of the idea of working and being productive and like go. It doesn't. I don't know. That's not how this work always happens, you know. So yeah, Grace, when do you do the invisible creative work?
All the time, actually.
What does it look like for you?
Yeah. So for me, I actually have a hard time not. Like, I'm either making art of some kind. I'm either drawing or painting or coloring or doing like studies or stuff, or I'm like, even if I'm away from my art station and I'm not actively drawing anything, my brain just, it pays attention to everything, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm outside, I might be paying attention to the light or how the light, like if the clouds are really interesting that day, I'm like mental noting, like, oh, how are the clouds? Like how's the light playing off of that? Or me and my husband watch a lot of movies, and we really enjoy watching movies, and that's something that I can watch them and I thoroughly enjoy them and I can sort of get into that hypnosis, but there's always this like segment of my brain that is just noting and paying attention to like shot choice or the lighting that they're using or the sort of colors of lighting that they're using. There's just always this little chunk that's just like dedicated to like just making mental notes. And on one hand, it's incredibly helpful because I find myself sort of using that kind of knowledge all the time, that sort of little bits that I pick up here and there. Yeah. But it can get a little exhausting, and I do find myself getting a little, like, sometimes I have these like periods of like sort of mini burnout. I never have like huge burnout, but like mini, where I'll sit down and it's like making art is just harder or something. It's like I can just tell my brain is tired, and it just needs like a couple of days where I'm just turn everything off and stop. Because I actually really struggle with the stopping part. My brain is always doing, it's either actively creating or it's doing the passive, pay attention to everything kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I find myself, I have to be very intentional to not be on all the time, just like you were just saying. And like you were saying, there just comes a point where you need to not work. You need to not be in this like, even, I don't know, I heard someone say once that there are times to breathe in and times to breathe out. Yeah. And where, breathing in is doing the things that nourish you and breathing out is the creation. And it's not just a creation. It's also, like you're saying, it's like taking in all this information and analyzing and just constantly working. And so I know for me, I definitely need to be very intentional about making sure. Otherwise, my wheels start spinning and nothing has traction. Nothing works for me. So for me, let's see. I think probably a couple of the biggest things is if I can get stuck into a book reading, my brain will turn off.
Yeah.
At least for here and now. And otherwise, I always have some kind of like secondary hobby or something going on. At the moment, it's like foraging for medicinal plants.
That's so cool.
It's like this whole other side of things, or I think the last couple of years, mushrooms and just now going into some medicinal plants. And because it's it's also like learning, and instead of taking something in and analyzing things, it's not my work. And so there's just something very different about it. And so I can go on these walks and then I think like there's even something more passive that happens about sort of creative thinking, where having the ability to turn off almost means I sort of become more receptive to the eureka moments, or like the things that they pop in your head and you're like, oh yeah, this is a thing I can do with my work. Like there's I don't know if there's any truth to this, but it feels true that like if I go out and intentionally not work, some part of my subconscious is working, and I'm able to be more receptive to the ideas that sort of just come instead of trying to force everything all the time. What is your relationship with it?
Well, intentionally not working is a pretty good way to put how I try to do things.
I work at not working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So usually, like I'm very like hyper aware of the times when I'm not creative. I feel a little guilty about it most of the time.
Yeah, I know exactly how that feels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm always out in the woods too on the weekends, and just I try to let my brain play the way a kid would.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll just like if I see something and I'm like, oh, that looks like a face, I try to push it. Like as soon as I recognize that I had a thought that's not completely based in reality, I'll try to be like, oh, what else could that be? And then I'll hold on to it and later turn it into something. And then usually I stay up way later than I should, trying to do that type of like refilling, refilling
Right.
old tanks.
Yeah.
And it could be reading or watching a movie, but I know that I need to do double time on that, and I can't just relax. So if I'm watching a movie, I'll be trying to recognize like foreshortening in certain poses. I know that sounds crazy, but that's just the kick I'm on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because of Grace, I've been noticing the lighting in movies. It's great. And because most of the movies I like aren't that cinematic, but my husband does like movies with really great lighting and stuff. So I'm able to watch more with him than I used to.
It's amazing the stuff the cinematographers will do. They're basically, I have a book called Painting with Light, and it's actually a cinematography book, and that's what they're doing. You know, their art is like how to set up like the actual light and stuff, and it's just so cool what they'll do.
That is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to look into that.
That is really cool. I also I go to the gym.
I was gonna say gym. Gym is one of those.
Yeah.
My brain can't be on while I'm doing the gym because I'm like so busy, like lifting heavy weights and stuff. I just can't do anything else.
Yeah. So I go to the gym. I do some swimming, and yeah, like you said, you can't like intentionally really process through a lot of things. But I also find that that's a time where, for whatever reason, you're moving your body. You're kind of getting into your mind into a different kind of position, kind of mindset, and it really helps things. Whenever I feel stuck, or like I can't make progress right now, go to the gym. Like,
yeah.
And then at the end of that time, either I will be feeling better physically, and so like I'll be in a position where I can get in and intentionally do it, or something will strike me in the middle of it, and I'll be like, all right, cool, yeah, let's go do it, let's go work. So yeah, that's a huge thing for me.
I feel like boredom is really important for that. Like, I don't go to the gym, but when I'm walking my dogs, or like I'm doing something that I have to do that's not creative,
yeah,
a lot of the times that is the best. Like if I'm washing the dishes, even
yeah,
my brain goes a million miles away, and that's sometimes right where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Or yeah, when I walk my dogs, I'll notice like the little, like right now there are stink bugs, and they fit perfectly on the shape of the leaf. And I just keep seeing them, which is a little creepy, but also really cool. So
yeah, I've also recently had time. So both my kids have started playing soccer. And so like 3 days a week after I get home from work, we go and they go to their soccer practice or whatever. And so that essentially leaves me with time where like I put the blanket down on the soccer field, and either I read or I just do nothing. And I try to like really take that time of doing nothing, and because it's so tempting for me to try and fill it.
Yeah.
And there's obviously good for that, but I think there's something that you can't quite pinpoint that is just amazingly good about literally doing nothing.
Yeah.
With no intention, really letting yourself get bored, because I find that after those times I feel refreshed, or I feel, I don't know, a certain sense of energy, that creative energy that I can then spend.
That's probably the difference between studying then and whatever this is, creative thinking.
Right. Yeah.
It's like there's no expectations, no end goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
think the studying is very directed. If I'm
Exactly.
studying something, there's probably a problem I'm wanting to solve, or there's something I'm wanting to figure out, versus this kind of like floaty creative thinking. It's just whatever, you know what I mean? It's just kind of whatever might pop up, some like cool clouds I might be studying, or you know what I mean? It's nothing directed.
I think actually a lot of people get themselves in trouble when they try to study, but their mode of studying is non-directed.
They're getting confused.
And that's still a really good activity to do, but it's not studying. Like you don't come to the end of that with more knowledge about how to do your work.
Yeah.
That's just an aside, right? Not really. But yeah, so there's some things that I find difficult when it comes to creative work. Things like there is times and places where I feel like I just can't force a decision. Like where I don't know what I want to do next. I don't know, and I can't force a decision, because if I force a decision from experience, I know I'll back out of it, or I know like it'll be a bad decision. And that's definitely one of those things where when I get myself in that situation, I need to go and do more of nothing, or I need to go do more of exercise, these other things that kind of, It'd
be so hard when you have people and schedules.
Yeah, the hard part is that it's work. Like for us, it is work. It's work, and we need to do it, and we need to get it done.
To recognize it is work is like you have to remind yourself constantly. And you have to have people around you that respect it too. Like, that's important.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who won't understand that a part of your process is literally not working.
Yes.
But that's working. And like, I know people who will look at that and think that's lazy, or that's like, what are you doing? It's like, there's no way I can describe this to you.
I had an aunt. I was not there, so I heard this later. One of my aunts, I have multiple aunts. I have a very big extended family, so I have a lot of aunts and uncles. But this was a conversation between two of my aunts. And apparently one of my aunts went up to the other one and was like, what does Grace do all day? Does she just like sit on her butt? And my other aunt was like, no, she works on her art and all this stuff. And I heard that. I was so offended. I was like, whatever, it's so hard. But I'm with you. I think a lot of people don't see that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't, to them, it doesn't, like, I think non-creative people, it doesn't, I don't think they see it. Like, I don't think they quite get it.
Well, I think there's a part where it's understandable, because if you think about any creative field where you haven't really tried, you're like, how hard can this be? And like, we know from experience, really hard.
Really hard.
Yes.
But you're like, drawing. How can that be? Like, how hard can it be? Or like, I'm gonna sit down and write a story. A lot of people talk about writing a story, and they just picture, okay, well, I'll just sit down and then I'll just type and we'll see what comes out. Like, how hard could that be?
I mean, like, really as adults, I don't think there are very many people who are able to just have time. They just happen to have time. Like, you have to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, you also know it's limited. And so to get into that space where it's almost like you have to forget that you're trying to not try. Yeah.
I mean, you could keep a journal of like how you're feeling and how things are going. Like keep a journal of, and then, that's one of the things I do with food, right? Like, you put in food, keep track of your food, and then also keep track of how you're feeling. And then you start to be able to connect the food to the feeling. It's also like, keep track of how busy you are, and also how much progress you're making, and like what kind of success you're having, and see where they actually connect. And I think once you're able to have real tangible experience and evidence of it doesn't work if you just keep going.
it's also not every day that you do take off to not think about work is going to end up like if you truly do forget that that's your goal, sort of, you might not end up using it for that. I know a lot of the times if I'm like, okay, today I am not going to be actively drawing, I might end up accidentally doing like shopping trip. I could like I probably do pick up a few things. Like I know
Sure.
a lot of the times I'll notice the relationships or like the body language between people in the store. The other day I saw this big burly man with a beard and like these round glasses, and he was with the cutest tiny little girl ever. And just like the way they were interacting, my brain was like, I love them. You know, and it's just from getting out of the house and just going on a little shopping trip to get some coffee sweetener. But yeah, a lot of those days that I'm probably should be like out in the woods or doing something that I know I'm going to get a lot of ideas from, I might end up just at the grocery store. So
I mean, that's
I
life,
guess it
right?
can happen anywhere though.
Yeah,
That's the point.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Making a comic, you know, so much of like when you're making characters or making stories and stuff, it's just stuff you're pulling from, you know, like I guess if you lived in a cardboard box your whole life and never like experienced life, you wouldn't be able to make anything, you know? So I think there's a lot of value in even just going to the grocery store. There's just so much you can pick up and observe from other people and just the world.
You said that and I thought of box trolls. And I'm like, someone could figure it out.
Like a little magic mirror. They can watch the world through.
There's also like thinking about creative work and the kind of times and places where it's working, it doesn't work. For me, there is a sense of like relaxation and safety that you need in order to be able to like really get creative.
Yes.
And so that's also part of the catch-22 of doing creative work. It's like, if this is work, we get paid for it, we make it work, but at some point in time, like you have to have this balance of being able to be relaxed about it and be casual about it. Because just sitting down and forcing things, it's not the space where you can be receptive to good ideas. Now there is times and places where that's what you can do, like sitting down and just working. There's a lot of different kinds of tasks inside of maybe your process, whatever that process is, that aren't so much about the ideas and about this kind of stuff, like just drawing the lines around things. Like you can do it no matter where you are.
I think it's similar to the advice, like, you know how people will always tell single people that you'll find them once you stop trying, you'll find them stop trying. Or like the horrible, I'm not saying this is good advice necessarily, but like they'll tell people trying to get pregnant, it'll happen when you stop trying. And I do think that to some degree it's true.
Yeah.
But usually it's better if those people are putting themselves in a position to not try, right? So, like you go out into the woods, like I said, go out in the woods, get out of your house, watch something new, listen to something new. Even if you're not doing it with any actual goal, if you are intentionally trying like new things or really trying to relax, it's going to be more likely to be useful.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
I'm always fascinated by the idea of like artist retreats.
Oh yeah.
Or with groups of artists hanging out and the goal is for them to sort of relax together. Like just with the idea that art is somehow a connection.
Yeah.
That sounds so fun. Have either of you done that?
Yeah.
No, I've never done it.
I've spent time with other artists where we don't really have a goal. We always end up drawing, always end up working on something or talking about things. And it's always inspiring. It doesn't always make like new connections in terms of what it is I'm actually creating. And a lot of the times I see something that works for somebody else. I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's do it. Let's go for it. And it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But it is always, I always come away thinking, I didn't think that thing would work for anyone, but it works for them. And that's really cool. That means that like something else can work for me when I don't think it'll work. But yeah, I definitely find that inspiring, if nothing else.
I really enjoy being around people who are creative when they're relaxed, because a lot of the times that's when they let their stream of consciousness just kind of come out. And I don't know if they're even aware of how creative they can be. You know, I'm like, you realize you're a genius, right? And they're just having fun in the moment. I would love to spend just more time around creative people who are just not doing anything. Yeah.
One of the hard parts is turning, or like that they talk about that having a good idea is not new, or like that's not the invaluable resource, because everyone has good ideas all the time.
True.
And they are genuinely good ideas. It's the ability then to turn around and turn that great idea into a thing, and then to be able to communicate about that thing.
Yeah.
That's the really hard part that I wish, like I know people who are so convinced that because this thing that they're doing is such a good idea, like it's going to change the world, or like it's going to become this next big thing. And then they never do it, or they're never able to like actually get the word out, or kind of whatever it is.
I think that happens a lot with people who aren't like creatives as a job, who aren't so, because this becomes a habit in its own way.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And they have a moment like that, and they think all of a sudden, like, this sounds so rude, but they're like, I did a thing. You want to be interested?
Well, they're also the people who don't actually ever do a thing.
That's yeah. They're like, you do things.
Yeah.
I had an idea for a thing to do.
For a thing for you to do.
Well, ideas are the easy part.
Somewhat guilty of that.
Ideas are the part that take no time and no dedication. They're the easy.
Exactly.
It's easy to just come up with ideas. It's implementing those ideas
I wish that was a job.
Surely that is a job somewhere out there.
Somewhere.
But not for us.
I think my favorite thing to do whenever I am in that turned away from art mode, it's more of a, I guess you could call it like, it's closer to studying. I don't know if it's fully relaxed, is to find the inconsistencies in nature, because I love detail. And for me, detail without inconsistencies or like flaws is just absolutely boring. So like if I'm on a walk, I want to notice that one piece of grass that's red in like a sea of green, you know, or that one really funky shaped mushroom when all the other ones are perfect, or the tree that for some reason all the bark fell off, or maybe it has a disease, but it looks really cool compared to the rest of the trees. And that's the kind of thing I bring back the most consistently. Like my mental library is full of that stuff. I could probably use more foundation, but I got a lot of that.
We were last weekend, we went hiking. There's a little it's called Donaldson Trails. It's not too far from us. And they have a hiking trails area, and they also have an area where they have a bunch of rescued animals and stuff. So I think they have an otter and some bears and coyotes, and they've got some cool stuff. So we went and looked at all the animals first, and they have raccoons that paint. We bought a raccoon painting. So, I'll show you. I'll post it on the Discord. I was actually going to wait, because I was going to wait till I got Justin's painting. Then I was going to post the raccoon painting and Justin side by side.
Which one's which? We don't know.
So I'm going to do that when it comes in. But they taught the raccoons how to paint. And so we went around looking at all them. That's just an aside. But so we looked at all the animals, and we went hiking. And I was talking to my husband, and I was like, Rachel likes to look for mushrooms when she's hiking. So I was like, let's look for mushrooms. And oh my gosh, when you look for they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Yep.
And they're so
addictive.
Yes.
Especially this time of year.
Yes. And there was some that were Home Depot orange. I mean, they were neon orange. I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah. Once you really start looking for them, it's like an absolute treasure hunt. And because then you start to realize which ones you're going to see consistently and which ones you're like, what is that? It's so fun. Really, really weird ones. Yeah. There are some that are so bizarre. You're like, I don't trust that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got you looking at movies differently, and you have me looking for mushrooms. So it's
love it.
That's great.
It was fun though. I got my husband take a bunch of pictures. I'll post them in the Discord. We saw some cool mushrooms.
I will say, ever since I think the first landscape course, there was an exercise where we had done. I actually think the purpose of it was the way we were doing the gradient, and we painted a plant like around the negative space.
Oh yeah,
of the
yeah,
gradient.
yeah.
I absolutely love that, because now every time I'm outside and I see any kind of plant in a patch of light, my
You just
brain
see
just
it?
goes straight to it.
Yeah.
That's a painting. That could be a painting. It doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. Little illuminated plants. And so that's because of Justin.
I love it.
Fully.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is to see a group of things that are all being affected by the same light and the same kind of fashion. And there might be like a gradient, or there might be a very continuous change in amongst, like it could be like a whole bunch of rocks, or it could be a whole bunch of trees, or anything that's kind of like they have the same plane, so they're facing in the same direction, and you're able to then to think about it as one big effect, and then break it down so that it's actually a million other little things, but they all have this one effect together and amongst them all.
I really like to notice the actual color of light versus shadow now too.
Oh, yeah.
Ever since that one color temperature exercise. Yeah, and I'm not that great at looking at big gradients yet. Someday I'm gonna have to go out with just that on my mind, like find the biggest gradients possible. Yeah.
Well, they get really abstract as well. You get things where it's not just.
I think that's what you're so good at, though.
Not just like very fluid. Sometimes they're kind of these broken gradients, or they have so much inconsistency in amongst the gradient. You kind of have to just like filter everything out and just see that big effect.
That's an absolute skill.
And then come back in.
That is hard.
It is hard. Thank you. This podcast is brought to you by my online painting courses. Now, whether you want to learn to paint landscapes in any medium, to figure out how gouache works, to work your way through form and rendering to make your paintings pop and feel lifelike, or you want to learn how to make hand-painted anime backgrounds, I have exactly what you need. My goal is to help you become a proficient and confident artist, and I'm really excited to see that happen. Now, you can find these courses in the link below, and I can't wait to share everything I know with you. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. Or like the way that texture changes as it wraps around things.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
obsessed with that ever since I've noticed it. Especially trees, it's different bark.
And sometimes they do the complete opposite thing.
Yeah.
Where they go from being like a light value on the inside to, because you start to see underneath the bark, there's like a dark outline on the outside. And so there's this gradient coming in and out. And sometimes you get to see dark in the middle, and as it goes around,
if it's like
light on the outside.
If it's one of those trees, it's kind of so smooth, it's almost shiny, and it's like a pale gray. It does that, like, what's it called, where the light at an angle is brighter? What's that? There's a name for it.
Yeah, so that's the Fresnel effect. So where the reflectivity gets higher as the grazing angle of the light gets larger.
Yeah. I love that.
It's beautiful. It's called fall off. The other word for it is fall off. Material fall off.
Okay.
But yeah, so sometimes it requires that you go in to all of these scenarios without the intention of something so specific that you're like learning or anything. Like, I really do think that it requires non-intention in order to be receptive, right, to a lot of things that are going on.
But, as we talk about this, I'm realizing that because I did I think we all have spent such a decent amount of time learning the fundamentals, like, and really absorbing why they're important and what to look for. Even when we are out there with our brains turned off, like, because it's intuitive at this point, like it's in our subconscious.
Yeah.
We are noticing probably more valuable things than we would have if we didn't know what is important.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. I think it's a balance.
Cool.
Like you kind of like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's so much, it's not just about what's happening. It's about how you see what's happening, and the fact that you don't see patterns that you don't understand. And unless you're building from the ground up, and that's even harder. But in a lot of times, like anytime we do a lesson in the course and we talk about one very specific thing, people go out and they're like, "Whoa, I'm seeing it everywhere."
That's my favorite.
And it happens. It happens all the time. Like, you just don't see it until you really put your attention on it, and then you see it everywhere.
It's like your brain flips a switch and
Yeah.
suddenly it's like you're able to see what you couldn't before.
Well, there's so much information that your brain filters out so much and
Mhm.
symbolizes everything. You know,
Mhm.
tree.
Well, and as artists, it's like our job to turn that off.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. So that you stop seeing the objects and you start just seeing what is.
Mhm.
But it requires sometimes you to tell your brain, like, this is important. Pay attention to it
Yeah.
before it actually starts to stop filtering that kind of stuff out.
Yeah.
It's like the more you know about art, the more valuable your time spent doing this kind of brain turned off. The better your subconscious is at
Right.
making it valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, go out there and do nothing.
Learn the fundamentals
What-
and then go out there
And then go out and do nothing.
and
But
it'll blow your mind.
I think probably the most important part is that, like, you don't have to feel guilty
No,
About-
you shouldn't.
about not really sitting in a desk and not doing work all the stinking time.
I think as creatives, sort of living is a lot of our work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to recognize the type of burnout that you can get when you don't allow yourself to get what you need like that.
It's intense.
It's fuel. It's really what drives you.
It's like art will just be harder. It's like I will know when I'm like, okay, I've been on for way too long, because it
Yeah.
almost feels like it'll feel like I've gone backwards. And it
Yeah,
only
for sure.
lasts like a day or two, because I can usually, like, okay, I need to step back and chill, and then I'm back. But I can feel it, and I will complain to my husband. I'll be like, I'm getting worse, and he's like, you're not getting worse. You just need to step away and stop. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, there's that thing. I think we've even talked about it here before, but there's that thing where you learn something, you go really intense at it, you try and learn at, and you start off doing all right, and then it just goes downhill.
Mm-hmm.
And then you leave for 2 weeks and you come back and you're better at it than ever you were, you know,
Yeah.
like at the peak of your learning. It just requires you to turn off in order to achieve. It's always interesting.